When we work out for strength, we're literally tearing muscle. Adversity is the catalyst to purpose, action, and success. It's adversity. So the bullying helped me. Life experiences of failing helps anybody accomplish their goals. Success, the prerequisite to success is always failure. You just have to learn from it.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Efren Delgado, and we're going to talk about the truth. Efren is a former FBI agent, and he's got some really interesting insights for you. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money? To be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote comes from his book and is from Seneca. I judge you unfortunate because you have never lived through misfortune. You have passed through life without an opponent. No one can ever know what you are capable of, not even you. You know, that's one of the truths that I think people don't realize. Struggle is what builds grit and character, and it shows you what you can do and what's possible. And if kids don't struggle, then I think they're going to have trouble succeeding because they're not ready for life struggles, and there are a ton of them. We'll chat about that a little bit today. Do you know what's true? I think a lot of what we believe to be true is made up, or it's not the complete truth. And if you don't take the time to delve into it and see, then you build your life on falsehoods. And as for me, I prefer the truth, and I'd rather build it on that. That's why I'm always searching for it and improving. Our guest today is Efren Delgado. He is a former FBI special agent with 25 years of national security, law enforcement, and private protection experience. He is also an author and a speaker to his threat assessment and consultation profession. He has advanced behavioral studies in graduate school and at the FBI Specialized Unit near Quantico. He's got tremendous experience in counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and violent civil rights investigation. He's got years of examining and combating spies, predators, and tyrants beyond criminality, revealing how true strength lies in humility, not oppression. Let's meet Efren and learn from him. So, Efren Delgado, it's great to have you join us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Rocky.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. Let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I grew up in a probably lower to middle class family, but my dad was very clever with being able to stretch his income so that we could live in a comfortably middle class family. So, we were really taught a lot of the standard issue, working class, middle class culture of work hard, earn your income, earn the reward of, or the value of having a good work ethic. And that went a long way. It wasn't until I was older that I started to realize there's a little bit of accidental slavery mentality that comes with that. That if you want to become an entrepreneur, you really have to literally break not literally, but figuratively break some of those chains.
Our money mindsets from childhood or from growing up carry us through life. And if you're not aware of them, then you're running on autopilot. And two, if you don't, they can serve you well, right? So like your father served him well to be able to raise you comfortably by doing certain types of things and living a certain way, but they can also hold you back. And just being aware of that and saying, okay, this mentality isn't going to serve me for where I'm going today or where I want to go, and challenge it and do different. And that's this. We've said it all the time. This is why lottery ticket winners, people who come into money through inheritance and all of that, usually lose it rather quickly because they are in an uncomfortable situation. We're going to talk a lot about uncomfortable.
Yeah, and here's another good point you bring up. There's two. My book is very much on like a counterintuitive truths, and just what we're talking about now. There's a lot of honor in working hard. So to pull out of like working smart and not hard, that's already more difficult because working hard is not bad. It's honorable. So it's almost like we want to run on a treadmill, sweat, when really we could just walk more and get the same benefits. You don't have to struggle so much. And the other irony is it's hard to get out of our default, which is comfortable. So when comfort is giving you contentment, keeping food on the table, but yet you have greater goals, it takes extra strength to get out of that comfort because it's not hurting you. It's not like the comfort is you're comfortable with abuse or something bad. You're comfortable with working hard and having enough food. But is enough really enough with one life? So for the ambitious, the people who want to live beyond mediocrity, we really have to rebel almost against our own defaults, our own comforts, just to go to see what's past that horizon.
You know, it's funny because there's a quote in the book, and it's on a different subject, but I think it's the same principle. You say, think about the various traumas of your past or present, whether they're atrocious or minor, is irrelevant. If something was traumatic to you, it must have impacted your views within your unique world and likely continues to.
Right.
And it doesn't matter whether it's money or any other type of programming belief that you got as a child.
Right. We're stuck with our human issues, and everybody has them. I had mentioned a buddy of mine who was a child soldier in South Sudan. So his perception of what's traumatic is vastly different than a lot of us who live in first world countries, and a stubbed toe is traumatic. So it's all relative, but it doesn't, I guess the point I was really making is if it's significant to the individual, your audience, my audience, then it's significant and we must manage that.
I talk about it as programming, and you have to ask yourself, is my programming serving who I want to be, or do I need to essentially reprogram myself?
Right. Yeah, and that requires thought, which is inconvenient. Thinking is inconvenient. Emoting is easy. So winners really go out of their way to do the most difficult thing. I think it was Henry Ford who said, thinking is the most difficult thing there is. That's why so few people do it. And I love that.
You know what? It's funny because I don't know that I heard that quote, but it does make a lot of sense.
It does.
It explains a lot of things that I really struggled with. But yeah, now I've come to realize a lot of those things.
Yeah, and that brings up another concept that I really focus on more like in the middle of the book. But thinking, logic, reasoning, that's one thing. Emotion is completely different. But we humans, whether you're from whatever background, just by the nature of being a human being, we often confuse the two. If we're passionate about something, that's not a bad thing, but there's emotion there which could cloud your view on what the reality is. So I think simply by thinking about emotion and logic as being two 100% different concepts that are both valuable, but they're different, will already help your audience, my reader, differentiate what is really happening. When you could understand the context better, you could assess it better, and you could strategically come up with a better outcome.
It's funny. We just finished watching Suits. I started watching it much, much later, but you see throughout there the character development, and my wife and I were just, because I watch it to have the conversations about the psychology of it.
Okay.
Like, why do they keep why do they keep getting themselves in trouble and getting so many people to hate them that they're constantly getting in trouble? And she said, you're one of the few people who can look at a decision and remove your emotions from it. They can't. And my wife's like, she can't. She knows it. But I will remove the emotion from the decision and go, is this a good decision, regardless of how I feel about it, even if I don't like the answer?
Right. I think men naturally compartmentalize easier than women. And I'm sure there's a lot of biological reasons why women tend to emote a little bit more. But simply knowing all of our strengths and weaknesses help us to manage them. So if I was a woman, I would be aware of this concept and just focus on that issue more. And as a man, I would also be aware of that concept and stop and pause and, okay, maybe I need to empathize more. Because if you're communicating with somebody who's emoting, you could logic them to death and it's not going to penetrate. It's just going to hurt you and the argument. And the opposite is true. If somebody's extremely reasonable and you're trying to grasp at their emotions, you might be bouncing off the wall too. So it's like oil and water is my comparison. If you have a tar stuck on your foot, like I discuss in my book, you need another oil-based density to remove it. And so the same is true as communication. Emotion to emotion, logic to logic.
And you have to be aware in the moment.
Right.
And to be able to move those, to do that. Let's take a step back. You asked a question as a little kid. Why do bad people choose to do evil over good? Did you ever find the answer?
I did find the answer. And it's a lot less complicated than it seems on the surface. So that question popped up when I was probably 6.5, 7 years old. I was being bullied a little bit, which I actually think relative bullying is healthy for growth because you learn about adversity. Elon Musk was bullied and hospitalized. Like, I don't condone that level of bullying, of course. So, but I think light bullying, even teasing, is healthy because we learn to manage adversity to some degree. But as an innocent, by definition, childlike, naive point of view, my question was simple. Why do bad people, why are they mean when they could simply be nice? And that's the question of psychology and specifically criminology. Why do bad people do what they do? And that answer is out of fear and weakness, not strength. So when somebody is projecting strength loudly, but the context does not, it's inappropriate.
Require it?
Yeah, it doesn't require it. It's not necessary. Then that's, it's an indicator that the opposite is true to their nature. For example, if somebody is like at a bar looking for a fight and they're drunk and they're stumbling, they're bumping into people, just looking for an aggressive fight, and there's no real reason for it, that person feels really small. So they're really trying to overcompensate for the weakness that they feel inside. And they're really scared that the world will recognize their weakness. So they project. The Chihuahua's barking at the doorbell, not because he's brave and courageous, but because he's fearful. He knows, consciously or unconsciously, that he's physically weak. Meanwhile, the German Shepherd, St. Bernard, passed out in the living room. He could answer the door, eat the bad guy, go to bed with a full tummy and no worries. So I think competent, kind, and humble people aren't loud and aggressive because they're content with who they are. And bad guys, bullies, criminals, tyrants, not so nice family members, somebody's always nagging at you, they're trying to not let you see their weaknesses inside because they're very fearful people.
That makes a lot of sense.
You see it in business too. The other way this materializes is in envy. Envy, jealousy, when people are brave enough to take any kind of risk, whether it's a business venture, an investment, walking up to somebody they might be interested in a romantic relationship with, the people who don't take those risks are envious of those who do take the risk. So you have to watch out for those, because if it's admiration, that's great. It's somebody's like, okay, I found a mentor. But if it's envy or jealousy, those are negative emotions, then they might try to pull you off your wall of progress. They might try to attack you directly or indirectly, most likely indirectly, because they're scared. They're weak. They're bad guys, for lack of a better word, to a smaller degree. Maybe they're not Hitler, but they're an envious person with weakness who doesn't want to expose that weakness. So that envy and jealousy might materialize in a dangerous relationship or partnership. So being aware of these dynamics could help your reader, your audience, avoid partnerships with those type of people, whether it's personal or professional.
And you have to be careful of the people around you. I think too often we don't spend enough time thinking about the situation and the behaviors, or pulling ourselves out of situations that, quite frankly, we don't want to be in. It's funny how often, even when we're in a bad situation, we get stuck and we won't leave. I always am wondering, like, why didn't they just leave? Why didn't they walk out? And there is a whole bunch of psychology to that, of why that doesn't happen.
Yeah, a lot of times people, especially in modern times, people deny their instinct. When ironically, your instinct has formed from, at the very least, your own lifelong experience. From childhood all the way to your current age, you have been learning consciously and unconsciously about the dynamics of the world. So whenever your instincts start to flare up, it should not be politically incorrect to question a circumstance because you might offend somebody. Or you're not being judgmental when you're actually using discernment, judgment, assessment, you're thinking. And so our instincts are kind of I won't say primitive, but a natural way of thinking with less effort. I quote Napoleon Hill in my book on the introduction of my chapter that I have on instinct, where I don't remember the quote exactly, but he's comparing thought in a flash as an advantage, as opposed to having to think through everything. And what I'm assuming that he's talking about is instinct. So when you suddenly feel an answer without having to take the time to assess it, that's a natural thing. Classic example, I've used this before. Somebody wearing a ski mask at the back of an ATM machine in the summer months of Arizona, that's a red flag. It's not complicated. You don't have to analyze it. You're not judging their fashion. It's just like, I better get out of here. So the same is true for not so obvious examples. And so I think instinct is a form of thought that we need to really listen to avoid danger and to also recognize opportunity.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm almost thinking, like, if you look at physical things like sports, I think it's a lot more instinctual, isn't it? Like, you feel what's going to happen, and you've got to be in tune with that to be able to do it.
If you play sports like soccer, for example, which is very team-oriented, not only does your muscle memory develop, it's still a memory. And when you start to recognize your strengths, your weaknesses, if you cut left, you cut right, oh, I better be careful with my left knee. Oh, you don't have to think about every movement you're making. And when you start to sense using your peripheral vision of an ally, somebody on your own team, or an opponent, somebody on the other team, you don't have to take the time to analyze all of it. You're using your instinct, your muscle memory, your peripheral vision, and those are excellent tools. So it's ironic when we get off the field and we live our day-to-day lives dealing with our relationships with our coworkers, our bosses, our significant others, we suddenly stop using our peripheral vision. We suddenly stop using our instinct. It's bad. We need to use those tools.
Out of curiosity, how much of this early life of yours and this the way you were thinking about things lead you to join the FBI, or was that just totally a different track that got you there?
It was very natural because as soon as I had that question of why are mean people mean and when they could simply be nice, that got me interested in psychology and criminology because I was motivated to not just protect myself, but I was mainly motivated to not allow other people to be bullied or victims of bullies or criminals and that sort of thing. It's always irked me when somebody has power to use that power to take advantage of people without power. So tyrants do that, criminals do that, bullies do that. And the big epiphany there, we discussed it before, is their motive. Why do they do it? And on the surface, it might look like they want money, they want sex, they want whatever on the surface, but much deeper, they're trying to fill an empty void within themselves. But because they were so cowardly, like the chihuahua barking at the doorbell, they were so cowardly, they refused to look inward. They refused to humble themselves. So they keep putting these little Band-Aids of opportunity, taking advantage of people over a gushing wound of personal issues. But the strong, good people, the humble people who do look inward, they're envious of those people because they're brave enough to look inward. So it's like hate compounded on hate, and they project that hate on other people. So they hurt them, they enslave them, they take advantage of them, when really who they hate are themselves. And this is all deep psychobabble stuff, but in reality, it's true. And so when the good guys in the audience starts to recognize these behaviors from a distance, you could avoid these people. And the best thing you could do is listen to your instinct. Don't be in denial, which is a problem most of us have because a lot of these truths are uncomfortable. If a family member is not an ally, I'm going to deny that. Nope, my brother is my best interest. Nope, my mom is on my side. Maybe they're not. DNA does not dictate an ally. A friend you've known for 30, 40 years, just because you've known them for a long time doesn't mean they have your best interests. Maybe you've been in denial about their not so great traits. So the best thing humans can do, especially ambitious humans can do, to accomplish their goals is to set up a healthy wolf pack, which is going to be few and far between people who qualify. Because most people don't have your best interests. Most people default to their comforts. Most people are not ambitious and want to live beyond mediocrity. So that means there's a small select few, by definition, people who are special, unlike most people, who should be part of your wolf pack. And sometimes it's better to be an eagle and fly alone. But assessing all of these dynamics with human behavior, with your instincts and trust in them, it's what will put you to the next level and start to accomplish these goals. I went off on a tangent, but that it kind of all connects.
No, it does. It reminds me, Tony Robbins talks about humans have 6 needs. One of those 6 needs is significance, which comes back to what you're talking about. A criminal, if he doesn't have significance, holding a gun over your head gives him significance.
Right.
And so he's trying to fill his human need. He just doesn't know how to do it appropriately. But it's solving a problem for him. And if you look at all the historical big criminals, they all thought they were helping the world.
Yeah, I would take that a step further. And I think a lot of people look for significance and meaning in an illusion of significance and meaning. That holding a gun over somebody's head is the illusion of meaning. I'm part of a gang. They're my family. But in the reality, the gang doesn't care about you. The tyrant, look, I have meaning. I'm running this government. I'm taking advantage of those people. I'm taxing. But their meaning is an illusion. They're on a treadmill going nowhere. The illusion is they've got the women, they've got the money, they've got the power. So it looks like they're accomplishing a lot, when really they're not addressing the real issues inside. So they don't understand. They're quote unquote successful, but they're miserable. How many of them are codependent on drugs? How many of them are suicidal? And people always wonder, well, they had everything. Why did they commit suicide? Why did they give themselves a slow death with drug addiction? Because they're not addressing the real issues inside. Real meaning, ironically, counterintuitively, comes out of selflessness, humility. Humility is the only path to wisdom, which is counterintuitive, and it takes strength. Being humbled is really difficult, but when you proactively seek it out, wisdom comes. But when you let life humble you, then you have a choice. You could take the wisdom that comes with it, or you could reject it out of spite. Everybody's against me. That's why I'm stuck in this valley. That's why I got my femur broken in the car accident. That's why I got cancer. That's why I got divorced. Or, hey, what did I do? How could I take 120% responsibility, humble myself? What could I learn from this? And then start to grow. When we work out for strength, we're literally tearing muscle. Adversity is the catalyst to purpose, action, and success. It's adversity. So the bullying helped me. Life experiences of failing helps anybody accomplish their goals. Success, the prerequisite to success is always failure. You just have to learn from it. It's all connected, though.
It is, because our original tagline, we came in it from a slightly different viewpoint, but you got rich, now what? Which is kind of the concept of you chased money, you thought it was going to make you happy, and you got all the money, but you still don't have everything that you expected to achieve. And it's the same principle that you're talking about. If you haven't done the rest of it, then the money is not going to solve it. More often than not, money magnifies it. And so whatever those underlying traits of yours there are, that's basically what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, I loved your tagline because it does set it up for, now that you accomplish this success, this financial success, this comfort, you have more time and you have more resources, which is valuable. Nobody can help anybody if they have nothing to help them with. If you don't have time and money, you can't help anybody. So it's a noble goal to be financially stable, successful. But what's great about that is now you have opportunity to really find fulfillment. I think searching for happiness is a complete waste of time. Searching for meaning and fulfillment is really the answer. And that answer is counterintuitive, and it requires humility. So I tend to agree with Viktor Frankl, a psychoanalyst, Holocaust survivor, who says meaning is the purpose of life. And I say that meaning comes out of selflessness, because when you're selfless, there's a lot of selfish benefits to living selflessly. So when you're acknowledging a higher power, when you're living with gratitude, and when you're serving others, those are three tangible ways to welcome humility into your life. And where there's humility, there's the opportunity for wisdom. You don't have to wait for life to humble you. You could embrace the wisdom that comes there. And that wisdom will dictate what your next step is. That's the what next part. And I'm confident that it will be something about serving others, and you will find fulfillment and accidentally stumble upon happiness.
Happiness is a byproduct.
Right. I like that.
So what inspired you to write the book, The Opposite is True?
So I saw a lot of these patterns I've been talking about throughout my life as a kid that really got exemplified in my bureau career, chasing around bad guys. And I noticed the criminals had the same issues. They're overcompensating with violence. I mostly dealt with violent criminals. They're overcompensating with violence to put a Band-Aid over a gushing wound of their inner issues. And the victims and witnesses were innocent, normal people with flaws like all of us who were victimized by these people. And they tended to be giving, caring, thoughtful, selfless to some degree. For example, somebody's willing to testify in court. There's some risk there of being intimidated by the bad guys. So they're taking some risk. Again, a counterintuitive view of strength, but these humble victims, humble witnesses are willing to risk themselves, which is an attribute of a good person. But the superficial illusion is that these terrorists, these hate crime criminals, these human traffickers are these powerful, dangerous people. Yes, they're dangerous, but when you really stop and look at them, they're filled with weakness, vulnerability, and selfishness. So those patterns is what I wanted to expose to my reader so that they could be encouraged that when they're in a dangerous situation, know that they themselves are stronger than the bad guys. And the person who's trying to rape them, the person that's trying to take advantage of their finances and defraud them, whatever the bad issue, knowing that you're not a bad guy yourself means you're stronger than they are. So you can do something about it. So I want to encourage people out there to recognize these patterns. So not only are they less likely to become a target of a criminal or of a tyrant, but they could start to think, analyze, assess, trust their instinct, and accomplish their own meaningful goals in spite of the criminals that are trying to pull them down off that wall. Another good example of that is political tyrants try to keep a society down. They try to keep a society emoting with fear, with the unknown, with dependence, because a society that thinks is a society that's more difficult to control. So one of the beautiful things about the beginning theoretical idea of our republic is freedom and power for the people and by the people, not by an oppressive government, not a tyrannical government. And I love the idea of it. And even though we're losing that, it's still our foundation. And I think it's a noble goal to keep that and remind the proletariat of that noble effort to keep the power to the people, for the people. And the antidote to oppression is thinking.
All right, now I'm going to get into conspiracy theories, but we're not going to go there. Maybe that's why we have government schools, but that's for another day.
Yeah.
Question, in the moment, right? If you are faced with a criminal or somebody in that moment, is there something you can do or say to break through to them to kind of, in a sense, unnerve them or take away their, like, to put them on edge, like to shift the power back to your side?
Yeah. Be aware, like the most important lesson with criminology is be aware that the criminal, the tyrant, the bully, the not so nice family member or neighbor, they're coming from a place of weakness. That's why they're lashing out. So when you see any indicators of selfishness or weakness, time and distance is always your ally. So the sooner you do not deny your instinct, you do not deny the indicators, the safer you'll be. So having said that, now because they're weak, you have to know they're going to target somebody they perceive as weaker because they'll be an easy target. So if you make yourself literally, figuratively tall, strong, powerful yourself, they're going to move on to another target. If the lights on your porch are on versus your house being very dark, if they see activity, they're moving on to the easy target. I'm talking about burglary. And same with like sexual assault. If somebody's looking confident, does not look like an easy target, they're going to move on to somebody who is drunk, unconscious, looking down, hunched over. They're looking for weak targets. And this is true in nature. Wild animals look for the limp infant that's falling behind the pack to attack. They don't look for the pack leader. So in finances, in nature, in any kind of vulnerable state, the less vulnerable you are, the less of a target you'll be. And the sooner you address the potential victimization, the less likely you'll be. So the way to tangibly stay in front of it is when you start to feel these indicators, don't ignore them. If you feel like you have to leave a dangerous situation, don't deny it and leave. If you're cornered somewhere and you suddenly appear a lot stronger than maybe you could bluff it, than you actually are, do that bluff. be a stronger, taller, more confident person so that they could have second thoughts about attacking. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. I noticed throughout the book, there were a ton of Stoic quotes.
Yeah.
So how did that come to be? Like, how does that fit into all of this?
I'm a fan of the Stoics because two attributes of Stoicism that I love that totally goes along with my line of thinking is living in reality. There's a lot of uncomfortable truths in the world, but when we put those uncomfortable truths into our workspace, we can manage them, learn to understand them, assess them, and overcome them. There's a quote in there from Marcus Aurelius where he's describing like this beautiful royal purple gown. And he's saying, realize that gown is made from the ink of some kind of a sea urchin or maybe octopus or something. But he's saying, it's just ink from this animal. There's nothing really royal about it. We've made beautiful, but this is the presentation. And he goes on a list of examples of like, this seems beautiful, escargot, this beautiful, elegant, sophisticated dish. But it's snails. It's snails with garlic and butter. Anything with garlic and butter is awesome, but they're snails. So, yep, use it for the nutrition, enjoy it. But if you don't have it, it's just snails. So we often get lost in the emotion of a lot of beautiful pictures. But if we just break things down to the reality, the bones of what they are, we can manage them, we can put them in perspective and move on. When people are about to do some kind of public speaking and they start to get nervous, and what do they often say? Picture the audience in your underwear. What they're saying is, everybody's human, everybody has fears, everybody's uncomfortable. When you realize you're not the only person with issues, that everybody out there has issues, amazing people, Tony Robbins, everybody. As soon as you start to really understand that reality, so they're like, I'm on the field just like everybody else. I could play this game just like everybody else. So perspective is huge, and the Stoics are huge on that perspective. The other aspect of Stoicism that I really appreciate is humility. Like I said before, Stoics really exemplify wisdom. And my theory is why they exemplify wisdom is because they really seek out humility. Again, Marcus Aurelius said, it is possible to live a good life even in a castle. And at first you're like, well, of course you're living a good life. You're in a castle. But what he means is he has so much power, so much comfort, everybody at his beck and call, that his path of least resistance with all that power, luxury, and comfort is corruption. My chapter 16 is power is a natural corrupter unless you insert humility. The only antidote to not being corrupted by power, a gun, money, good looks, fame, a badge, whatever the power is, I promise you, if you're a human, you'll be corrupted by that power unless you insert humility. And the way that insert humility is acknowledging the higher power, having gratitude, serving others. You keep these things in mind, you will not be corrupted by it. You will embrace it, and you'll use those. What's next after you've got the money? It's service. It's humility. It's gratitude. It's acknowledging a higher power, which means there's a greater purpose in our lives. And that's the answer. That is the answer. And it's beautiful. And the Stoics appreciated it. And today it still applies today.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
This kind of reminds me of marketing and the stories that we're told. And it's gotten worse and worse. But if you think about why women buy or want a diamond engagement ring, it was all based on marketing. How much to spend on the ring? Marketing. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Montgomery Ward created that. Marketing, right? Even Christmas, in a sense, has been hijacked from a religious holiday to the biggest shopping season of the year. It's all marketing. All of these different things that occur, and in a sense, they're all designed to make you smaller so that when you buy this, you'll feel bigger, right? Going back to what you're talking about is creating that. And the reality is these people have gotten very, very good at it, right? And they're phenomenal, which is always kind of funny because I get all these stupid scam emails and stuff. And you hear about all these scams. You're like, these people are so good at this. If they would just go into marketing, they could make their money legally and they could do well at it, but yet here they don't.
I was just going to make a point. What's powerful about marketing and the people who are good at it, it's all about motive. If your motive is greed, then you can be great at marketing and take advantage of people's emotions. If your motive is more altruistic, you want the best for people, it's best to tap into their emotions. People make every decision based on emotion. Emotion is the energy that drives all humanity and every single decision, from just picking up a pencil and writing something down to seeking a very long-term North Star goal. It's all about emotion. If I want to go on a diet, if my good intention is I want to get in better shape, you'll probably stick it out for 2 to 4 weeks and move on to the other thing. If your intention is not just being in better shape, is surviving cancer so I could see my grandkids, suddenly, hey, he stuck to that diet for 3 years. He's already over cancer and he's still sticking to the diet. So emotion, I've compared emotion to the turret on top of a tank. It's extremely powerful. And if it's pointed in the wrong direction, could really cause a lot of damage. But if you use the thinking part, the prerequisite, the assess, adapt, and overcome part of any winner's outlook, then you point the turret in the right direction, which should be righteous, selfless, long-term goal. And you're not just emoting, you're thinking first, you point it in the right direction, and then you pull the trigger now that it's pointed. People forget about the turning part. Point it in the right direction, and your emotions could be awesome.
Well, and that comes down to any principle. Like I tell people, if you don't have a life plan, if you don't know where you're going, you're wasting a lot of energy going the wrong direction most of the time.
Yeah, and in one of your podcasts, you discussed, I don't know if you use this phrasing, but the reverse engineering what your plan is. You know where you want to go. You have to know where you want to go to get there. Mm-hmm. Then you break it up. But I'll add to that the why you want to get there is really what will keep you going on all the baby steps to get there. And I don't like when people jump to the fluff part of it, like, what is your why? And a lot of the kumbaya stuff. That one of my favorite attributes we discussed before we started recording, one of my favorite attributes about your podcast is you back up all of these sentiments with pragmatic advice. This is how you do it, and this is how they do it, and this is an example. And it's easier to follow. Everybody wants to be successful. Everybody wants money. Everybody wants freedom. But you show us how to get there, and you use people's examples on doing that. And that takes, the fluff is necessary, but backing it up with the pragmatic is really what will get your audience to that next level. And I appreciate that.
And thank you for that. The why question works, but the secret of the why question is you have to ask it 7 times. Why do you want to do that? And they give you an answer. Well, why do you want that? And then they give you an answer. And then you ask why again. And usually by the 6th or 7th why, you're going to get to the raw emotion that's driving it all. And that's a coaching technique. You just keep asking why until you get to the truth.
Like a 7-year-old would.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
like
true.
a 7-year-old would.
Kids have a lot of wisdom because they don't have all the adult cobwebs that cloud their thought. I do appreciate that. I love the story you gave on that same concept of the fisherman, and somebody's saying, why don't you buy a boat? You're selling these, like, well, why do I buy a boat? And then you went all the way to like marketing this fishery, and like then one day you could retire and then you could fish and have all the time. Well, I'm already doing that. It was like a full circle. That was the greatest story that exemplified what you just said.
Yeah, I find most people, and even business owners, like we put too much, I won't say fluff, but yeah, actually it is fluff. We do stuff to work hard, but none of it has any value whatsoever. And so you're wasting your time and your efforts, and that's the culture we live in. Oh, you got to grind it out and 10x it. And I'm like, why can't I just do less and make more? Like when you shift your concept to, hey, I'm going to work less and do more. And you know what? It's possible. But for a lot of people, they don't even believe it's possible. The reality is it is if you decide to go that direction.
And that's, I'm alluding to your reference to our school system. It's by design, I think, where a country with a lot of employees, and you could put slaves, in quotes there, where you're working for a larger entity and rewarding that, it's you're going to serve the top people in power, and not serving yourself under the illusion of serving yourself because you're comfortable. You've got food on the table, but you'll never get beyond mediocrity. You'll stay within mediocrity, which is not the worst thing, but it's not the best thing either. Back to the pragmatic, I'll often use, in my job now, I protect people privately. And whenever I'm doing a threat assessment of a pursuer, a bad guy that's targeting one of my clients, whether it's a corporation or an individual, I'll do a threat assessment. And one of the main factors I'm looking for is specificity. So the more vague a threat is, the less likely it will happen. The more specific a threat is, I'm going to get you because X, Y, and Z. I know where you live. I'm going to be there at 5 p.m. with this arm, and I'm going to see X, Y, and Z family members, and we'll see how they do. That's very specific. So that's a serious threat you've got to take. And take it out of the realm of bad guys and danger, and let's just bring it into practicality. Any goal you want to accomplish, the bad guys know this. You have to be specific about it. And you said, write it down. And I love that. Write down your goals, have a budget, which I need to work on, by the way. But being specific is the way we accomplish good things too. The bad guys do it for bad things. The good guys can do it for good things. When you have a North Star goal, reverse engineer it. Be very specific about what you're doing in January, what you're doing in February, what you want to accomplish by May 1st. And the more specific, the more realistic. Read it throughout the day like you condone. Remind yourself of where your North Star is so you stay on path. Point to point, like Abraham Lincoln says.
It's funny. I just went through an exercise of rewriting my life plan, and I had to do it because everything on the original life plan that was written back in 2016 was pretty much it. So it was time to reset goals and reevaluate everything I wanted. And I didn't realize it, but I shared it to my mastermind group. They're like, you put a lot of stuff in there. It's 16 pages. I'm like, what? It's 16 pages. I didn't even know it was that big. I tend to be very short and to the point. And so it was just kind of surprising. But I've laid out clearly what, you start that whole process. We start with our eulogy. And then we live the life so that's the eulogy. So it's already written and done. And it's, it's easy. But I find, I can't tell you how many times I tell people, even people who are smart, successful, to go through this process. It just doesn't sink in. They won't do it. And I'm like, which probably brings us to the next quote that was in your book. And maybe this is the reason why. So this is actually a quote. You quoted someone else, which is Carl Jung, saying, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. As you know, the podcast called Richer Soul, right? So and that's the other part of it. I think people don't realize that. They think, oh, if I go over to this woo-woo side, I can't have money. I'm like, no. We can have money and life. They are not oil and water. They are compatible. And one can actually fuel the other very nicely.
The Jungian psychology is a psychoanalyst. Him, like Freud and Karen Horney, they focused on the unconscious, the subconscious. So a lot of our childhood issues, the things that make us comfortable and also make us squirm, it all comes from our childhoods. It's our default. It's our comfort zones. And so what he's saying in that quote is, if you actually want to accomplish certain goals, but it's not your natural default to get to those goals, then you have to reflect, be honest with yourself, be vulnerable, which is things that the bad guys resent, but the good guys should pursue. And they require strength. So when you look in your own issues, you could bring it into your workspace, manage them with honesty and objectivity, and work on them. People go to therapy to try to accomplish this stuff, but I think a lot of times they're running on a treadmill and just want the therapist to tell them what to do.
I agree with you. I mean, therapy, people are in therapy for 30 years. It's not doing anything. You got to do things differently. We've had a lot of people on who use other modalities. And lately, I think the biggest shift that has come in that whole space, on top of just other types of modalities, is adding in plant medicines and using other types of things which really help to open up the mind to reprogramming. So with psychedelics and some of that, for so long they were considered bad. All of the leading cutting edge research is, hey, wait a minute, these things can help us rewrite that bad programming we got as a child, let go of those patterns, and move on. Because I find therapy, at least from what I've heard, it just keeps you stuck in the loop. It doesn't break the loop.
Well, I think it goes back to the patient's motive, and do they really want to make progress? Look, comfort is comfortable. So it's really hard. I can look at it this way. Comfort is like a warm, fuzzy blanket in a log cabin. And outside of that cabin, it's a blistery, gusting ice storm. So compare a lot of uncomfortable truths, like a family member not being the best person for you, or reaching your long-term goal is such a distant, far summit on a mountain. I don't want to even go there. I want to just be there. I'll take a chairlift. But when you open the door to that warm, cozy cabin and let this breeze in, and then you go and grab that comfortable blanket off that person, they're going to hate you. And anytime you're telling truth to somebody who doesn't want it, they literally hate you for it, because it's cognitive dissonance. And Plato said, no one's more hated than he who speaks the truth. The reason they're hated is because you're making them not be in denial. And people literally kill to stay in comfort, to stay in denial. So that's why I say my audience is not most people, and I dare say your audience is not most people. They're special because they're people who want to live beyond mediocrity. They're willing to get out there in the ice bath of reality, and tear muscle tissue to get stronger, do some fasting to trigger their body's survival mechanism to improve and heal and eat those cancer cells through autophagy. All these uncomfortable lessons we're learning through science, through nature, through God's divine influence on our lives. is to climb that mountain with effort to reach the summit. Otherwise, we'll stay in the valley. And who wants to be content in the valley? Just because you're used to it doesn't mean you should stay there. But that's where wisdom is. If when you fall off the mountain, take that fruit of wisdom, stuff your pockets, nourish yourself, and resume your climb with that additional wisdom. But don't just sulk there and blame the world. But that's a choice. It's all a choice. Free will matters.
You know, it's funny. In my business, we do fractional CFO work. And one of our taglines is, we will tell you the truth, even if you fire us. Because if you're not willing to hear the truth, we're not a good fit for business. Like, that is one of the things we tell people during our sales process. Like, if you're not willing to listen and you're not willing to show up, you're not a good fit to be our client.
Interesting. And that's the truth with therapy too.
That's the kind of people we want to work with. So It goes back to the values. That's the kind of people I want to work with and serve. And if they're not those kind of people, you know what? I'm okay going after a very small niche of people who are okay with that.
Your client's motive matters. If their motive is to just feel good, you're not going to have any results. If their motive is to have results, they're like, okay, what do I have to do?
Yeah. They're willing to, I don't want to work with people who don't want to take action. And so this is how we filter out before they even get to my calendar. It's a filtering sequence so that we don't have to deal with all of the noise and fluff and whatever. We put obstacles in their way so that those who finally show up have raised their hand and say, I'm willing to do the work.
I love that. And it's another Stoic sentiment that, what was it? The obstacle is the way. Ryan Holiday, a modern Stoic fan, he says that from the Marcus Aurelius quote.
It's somewhere here.
Yeah, the point is, you're right there at the big boulders in the middle of the road, and you have to find a way around it, through it, or something, not just kind of deal with it. But that's where you're indirectly, what it's saying is you're suddenly stopped in your tracks, you're humbled. And that's where the wisdom is, because it's not easy. Suddenly, when something's not easy, that's when you test yourself. So yeah, that's true of, do you really want to lose weight? Do you really want to get better with therapy? Do you really want to make money? You have to face these ugly, uncomfortable truths, but you'll grow from it, and life's a lot more fun that way.
It is. I want to touch base on one last topic that you covered in the book.
Okay.
The reality of racism in America. I'd love to get your thoughts.
I think this is going to be counterintuitive again, like the whole theme of my book, it's counterintuitive, is we're living in the least racist time in history. And the true definition of racism, in my opinion, in my experience, is there has to be an element of hate behind it. If you hate somebody else because of their ethnicity or the color of their skin, you're a true racist. How many people do you actually know that are true racists? A joke that teases a different culture, oftentimes it's cultures of their friends. There's no hate behind it. It's humor. We used to joke around with all of our multicultural friends and family members about the different quirks and traditions we have, and we'd laugh about it arm in arm, enjoying a meal together. And those aren't racism. That was actually enjoying the diversity, beautiful diversity of humanity, multicultures, and all of that. But when there's true hate there, my main principle, like I described most criminals, tyrants, and bullies, is that hate is not truly directed at the superficial target, the scapegoat of their hate, like a Jewish person, a black person, a gay person. They don't really hate those people. They've convinced themselves that they hate that category because somebody amongst their group of genuine racists chose that target so that they could project their own self-hate. People who are generally racist, who hate another group, in reality hate themselves and are using that group to vent out all that hate. The problem is it's not the actual answer. So they make zero progress. They're running on a treadmill going nowhere. The The opposite problem, not opposite problem, the compounding problem is they join forces with other people who target that same group. So groupthink invades. So if they all convince themselves, okay, yeah, the Jewish person is wrong, or that people who love Trump are wrong, or whatever the target of their hate is, they start helping each other. Like, okay, we're right. That is the target. Okay, yeah, I'll go along with it. So they reward this delusion. So frankly, racism is stupid because it's all emoting and misdirected self-hate. If they were to be brave enough to look at themselves and their own issues of why they hate themselves, they would overcome that issue and realize the stupidity of their hate.
So sticking with the title of your book, The Opposite is True, if you actually go back in history and you read, I think a lot of the racism was to keep the poor white people fighting with the black people so that they wouldn't uprise against the rich people. It was more designed, it was set about, because when these two groups fight each other, the rich get to stay wealthy. And there's I can't remember the name of the book that I read, but it went quite deep into this subject, and it showed, historically what was going on and how people were behaving back then.
Well, the old story is the same. These are the dynamics of a tyrannical government controlling their people. You can't control people who are independent, who are thinking and pursuing their meaningful life ambitions. You could only control people who are dependent, emoting. When you emote, you can't think because oil and water don't mix. So when people are all riled up with racism, with war, with hatred, with confusion, with dependence because they're starving, they don't have time to think things out and question their government, question taxes, question the laws. So you can't take advantage of a free labor force if that labor force is free to think for themselves. So one trick that a lot of oppressors have used throughout life is to dehumanize humans who are victims of slavery or oppression. So the Nazis questioned the humanity of Jewish people. So they called them subhuman, and that was true of other races, homosexuals, whatever. They would call them subhuman so that they could oppress them. They could exterminate these subhumans in their minds. In American history, the slave labor made a lot of people rich with not having to pay their slaves. And what they said was African Americans were not human. They were subhuman. They were inhuman. That made it a lot easier to oppress. So people who are honest with themselves, like the good guys tend to be, see these edicts as frankly bullshit. They see the crap of the propaganda for what it is. But the bad guys can't do that. They're benefiting too much emotionally from the power that they get from oppressing other people, from the money that comes from slave labor, and so on and so on. The common denominator with all bad guys is selfishness and the inability to humble themselves, to look inward, to reflect. So it's all cowardice. Criminals are not brave and strong. They are cowards. That's why they victimize. And the good guys are brave enough to be humble. And so there's inner strength there that they could tap into to accomplish a lot more than they probably believe or that they've been told they can accomplish. And they need to hear that. And that's why I like that your audience is hearing this conversation and my reader is reading my book, because good people need to hear they're stronger than they think they are.
And I think that's very true. I think a lot of people have a ton of self-doubt. And so it's that self-doubt that causes them to not realize how strong they are. And then others will, of course, pop on and help you in that way if they can, right?
And that
They're
self-doubt
very
is
good.
taught by society.
Yeah.
So who do you think you are? You're leaving the ghetto to go to college, or you're trying to be white? They hear things like that. Imagine what that does to your psyche. Or, oh, you're going to write a book? Oh, do you think you're smarter than everybody? Oh, you're right. Who am I to think I could write a book? It's ridiculous. Oh, you're saving money? Why? Because one day you want to have your own business? Do you think you're better than us? That's ridiculous. But people do it consciously, unconsciously. They learn these cultural dynamics to oppress their own family members, their own communities. And they were taught by who? By the tyrants from centuries ago. It's the same dynamic.
It's just keeping you down because they don't want to face themselves and do the work they need to do for the success they need to have. That's it.
That's right.
And
be powerful.
And be powerful. That makes a whole lot of sense.
I think envy is the most common sin there is. And it hurts everybody.
That it does.
It's time to learn the secrets of life.
What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I think humbly reflecting on what you truly aspire to. And I say humbly because that aspiration should be meaningful, like we've discussed. And once you have that North goal established, you know where you're going, then chopping it up into a bunch of smaller goals that you could accomplish a week at a time, a day at a time, a month at a time. So I think that's chopping up your long-term goals, but knowing what your long-term goal is.
I think the biggest lesson I've learned over the years, my goals aren't external. A lot of my goals are internal.
I like that.
So it's fixing me. I don't need to fix the world.
I love that.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
It's a good one. I think it's the message I want to get out to my reader, that you're worthy of accomplishing your goals in spite of your own culture or subculture trying to keep you off that wall of accomplishment. I think just growing up in a working class, middle class family and the cultures that most of the planet is more in that culture, and knowing that you really have to, frankly, rebel from those cultural influences just to have a chance at succeeding. And so I really try to encourage that to my fellow man, because the world is trying to oppress you, and you're better than that. God gave you a significant life to live, and it's worth dying for to accomplish those goals. Think about it that way.
And that's why we always ask that first question, to understand what are people's money stories and mindsets, which relate to all of this. It's just my view into it. But it applies to every part of childhood. And you just have to reprogram yourself. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I would tell that kid to focus on your long-term goals and not be easily influenced by the people around you. There's a concept in my book that's not a new idea by any means, but I call it association osmosis. The people you hang out with, they're going to rub off on you whether you like it or not. When you're a kid, you don't have a choice because you're stuck under the same house. But one of the benefits of being an adult is you could create your own family. Friends are family once you're an adult. So I encourage that 18-year-old to put boundaries against people who are not good for them. And if you can't eliminate, at least limit the negative people, and to be very selective about the people you spend your time with, because that will change everything.
And I always say you are the average of the 5 people around you. And that's why I think even for parents is to be careful who you put your kids around, which goes back to the whole school question that we kind of brought up.
Right.
If people would like to learn more about you, the book, where's the best place for them to do that?
The easiest place is probably my website, efrendelgado.com. It's EFREN Delgado.com. delgado.com. There you could get my book. You could learn about me. It's easy. There's links to Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And then if they have specific questions, there's a page at the end of my website that they could reach out to me and send me an email. But efrendelgado.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I don't know if the audience can see, but that's the book right there. It's got that unique cover that could stand out if you see it on Amazon.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to link to it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great.
I really enjoyed the conversation with Efren on his book. He offers a lot of counterintuitive wisdom that can really help us and challenge our assumptions, and also breaks us away from limiting mindsets. We get stuck in patterns and programming from our upbringing, and that holds us back from who we possibly could be, which kind of takes us back to the beginning of where we started. The other thing that I've learned in life is there is strength in humility, right? Too often it's, we're trying to be this strong person, but it's actually humility that allows us to grow. And make sure you've got the right circle. We talk about that often. Your circle is what's going to determine your success. So be careful who you put in it. Check out his book if you enjoyed the conversation. He goes into this pretty deep in there. And also, if you know someone who would benefit from this conversation, would you share the episode with them? I would appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening. Have an abundant week.